Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast. I'm Mackenzie Johnson here, co-host of our Science of Parenting podcast, and I'm really excited today. We're going to be bringing in a guest, an excellent guest, to talk about kind of an interesting topic. We're going to be talking about courage. And so, our guest that we're going to bring in is Chuck Smith, or Dr. Charles Smith, I should be official, who is really an expert in this concept. Literally wrote a book on raising courageous kids. That's the title. He was an extension specialist, like a professor and extension state specialist in parenting for a lot of years at Kansas State. We happened to get hooked up with him through a colleague of ours who used to be a colleague of his, knew about his passion, and that he has retired and had a little time that he'd be willing to share with us some of that expertise. So, really, I'm kind of like fangirl a little, let's be honest. That he is really considered kind of a parenting guru, and he's written books, multiple books. He's written multiple curricula, a speaker to, holy cow, I don't even know how many people on these types of topics. And so we're just kind of hone in on this one idea of courage today in our conversation with him. And we just felt like, our Science of Parenting team, we felt like this topic of courage is just relevant for being a parent of today. We see an increase in mental health challenges with kids and adults, with anxiety and things like that. We also know that our generation and our kids' generation has an increased access to scary news. And so just this idea of being courageous, and we'll get into the episode to figure out exactly what that means, but we felt like this is a really great topic for parenting. So we hope you enjoy it. Hello again. And today we are here with Chuck. And gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. So you're a professor emeritus at Kansas State University and a retired extension state specialist with expertise in parenting. Hello. Hey. You're our peeps. But you've also written several books in curricula, and holy cow, I'm just so excited to have you here and talking about raising courageous kids today, which is a topic pretty close to your heart, right?
Yeah, on Raising Courageous Kids, I began working on that immediately after, the day after 9/11, that horrible incident in the Twin Towers in New York, and the amazing acts of courage by the first responders.
Yes.
To that, and then also in the skies overhead, in terms of the normal people, not professionals, who rose up against hijackers in the plane.
Yes.
I just had to understand. I was just so impressed by that. I had to learn about the origins of the behavior that I saw on that day. One of the things that I did as I was writing the book, I looked at the Carnegie Hero Medal, which is an amazing act of courage and heroism by normal, everyday people in response to other people who are experiencing distress and danger. And what I focused on is I looked at the cases there of recipients, were the recipients under 18 years of age.
Yeah,
kids. Fewer, that's a small sample, but it takes my breath away. And I had to understand it. Therefore, Mackenzie, if you want to really understand something, you have to write a book about it.
I'll keep that in mind, Chuck.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is, real things that happen. And I think that's such a beautiful, I think I'm biased, of course, but a beautiful thing, and what an illustration of the extension mindset of the real world and connecting it with science. And so you saw things that inspired, of course, were devastating, but also you were inspired amidst that. And so I have some of the articles you sent me, and our listeners know I love to start with a definition. So I'm going to quote you to you. Okay. This is from your essay that you published with the National Association for the Education of the Young Child. And so this idea of courage that we're talking about today, you defined courage as persevering despite fear. I like that. Persevering despite fear. So can you tell me a little bit more about this idea of courage, and maybe even, give a few examples of times when our kids might need to be courageous?
Courage begins in fear. It's a response to fear.
Yeah.
And so, it's persevering despite fear or in the midst of fear. Like, for example, I was talking with a group of teachers, middle school teachers, in an in service and about this. And one of them said, I got an example for you of courage. When I was a young girl, my grandmother asked me to go to the hen house and collect eggs, which she did. She walked in the hen house. Well, one of the hens fluttered up and landed on her head, and the
Oh.
others squawking and fluttering.
Okay,
And
yep, terrifying. Uh-huh.
she ran out. And she said, days later, when I went back to my grandma's, and she said, honey, I need you to go get some eggs from the hen house. She said, I remember distinctly in my mind the moment that I stood outside that hen house
Oh.
and felt that fear, and she took a deep breath and went in and gathered
Mhm.
eggs. And I was very proud of myself that moment.
Yeah.
So you have kids, even younger kids, kids who are preschoolers or go to the doctor's office and they're afraid, or infants, toddlers, um, or children responding to a storm outside, and their little hearts beating very fast. They get up and they run into their parents' bedroom for
Yes.
help and climb in with them.
Been there.
Yeah, yeah, I think we all have. And I remember the issue of bullying
Mm.
that later in childhood, grade school especially, primarily,
Mhm.
with bullying going on, and how you respond to being bullied when you realize it's wrong. This is not right to be bullied. I don't deserve that.
Yes.
How do you respond to it? Deal with that fear. And I
Mhm.
know, like, that grandma, that she helped her granddaughter, I'm sure, after she realized that it was so frightening for her.
Yes.
She probably took her to the hen house before before they actually collected the eggs, and showed her, where the hens were and how to behave around hens and how to
Yeah.
reduce.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I really hear you say as you describe this is that fear is present in courage, right? So, like, it's not the absence of the fear. It's actually about feeling it, right? You are scared. You are experiencing the fear. And I think sometimes as parents, we maybe think like, well, I don't want my kids to be scared of this, or I don't want them to be fearful. But you're really saying that that fear is pretty important.
Well, it is. Our fear warns us. I mean, it's an alert.
Mm.
It's little bells
Yes.
up in our head, and what it's alerting us to is something that we believe is dangerous. I mean, it's a danger outside, um,
Hmm.
and being fearless without fear is to be reckless. And
Yeah.
we don't want recklessness to
No.
be a part of our child's life, and so that's a challenge that we have.
No, and I love that idea. Yeah, fear is an instinct. Like fear is something in our bodies like alerting us. I love that concept of it.
It's
Um
part of our human nature. I mean,
yeah.
how we survive. And but
It keeps us safe.
the problem with fear is called emotional hijacking. With any
Oh.
whether it's anger or fear, you can get hijacked. That means that
Ugh,
it overwhelms you, and you react thoughtlessly.
yes. I heard
So,
a term recently, like a therapy term about being flooded, right? Like
oh
the
yeah,
rest of your brain stops working. Is that kind of the same emotional hijacking is the same concept like the fear takes over.
yeah, and the fear, the risk is there. You've got either panic. With
Mm,
fear, it's primarily the risk is
yes.
panic, and that's dangerous to be driven by panic.
Mhm.
Anger, of course, then has the risk of rage
Yes.
and everything associated with that. So, um,
Mhm.
we want to respect fear. We don't want our children to be afraid of their fear. We want them to be thinking thoughtful about it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and that idea of like staying, I mean, fear itself is not the bad thing. We can learn from that fear. We can explore and examine that fear a little bit. I mean, honestly, like as a parent, I probably have some fear that I could explore, but that I can also help foster it in my kids too, right? We don't want that emotional hijacking to take over.
Well, you have what's called emotional contagion, where
Mm.
one person's strong emotions can ripple out and affect similar emotions in other people around them, whether it's
Oh,
children or anybody
yes. Well, and
else.
we talk about that actually in a nature class that we teach. We talk about if you're, I mean, with early childhood professionals or parents taking kids outside, we talk about being really mindful of not passing on fear, right? So like if you see bugs, spiders, snakes, but yeah, because of that emotional contagion, I can pass on this fear without even meaning to. And so being mindful of that.
Yeah.
But another thing that I hear you saying in all of this is this idea, like, yeah, you talked about a little bit about like being in that fear, recognizing it, but really you're talking about a skill, right? Like this, so this isn't something like courage is not something like some get and some don't. Like you might have like a natural inclination maybe, but that really being courageous is a skill or something that we can kind of help foster in our kids, which and as a parent, that's great news. It's not a luck of the draw. There's something I can do.
Well, you think about the issue of with infancy, something that we might call willpower. So
Mhm.
you have that infant who pushes herself up from the bed of the crib, to
Yeah.
stand up and hold on to the bars.
Or climb out, you know.
Or the toddler who's walking and falling and getting up again and falling and getting
Mm,
continued, all these things are part of our nature. We don't teach a child to smile. Children smile naturally in
mhm.
response to someone, the parent looking at them and smiling and nodding their heads.
Yes.
Um, but all what's in the human nature has to be nurtured. So,
Mm,
with the smiling issue, for example, a child who's by nature smiling, if no one smiles back at him,
mm.
then what do you have? You have a child eventually who doesn't
Yes.
smile,
Yes.
or a child who is not doesn't experience encouragement by a parent,
Mhm.
just stops doing it. So that we need
Yes.
to, like, help encourage the whole issue of courage
Yeah.
and that sense of willpower.
Yeah, encouraging courage, I like that.
Yeah, and you know we don't teach that courage. We have to
Mm.
encourage it. Using the word
Yes.
courage is so important.
Yeah, so we can kind of help foster and encourage that idea because yeah, some kids might have maybe a more natural. I think of the temperament trait of like approach or withdrawal, right? That like novelty or things that are unfamiliar or fear, right? Some kids might have a more fearful temperament, and some kids might be more of a quick to jump in. So they have kind of a baseline that might be different in their nature, but there's things we can do in how we nurture and encourage, right? So how do we as parents help develop this, skill or concept of being courageous? You identified actually in that article, well, you sent me several good ones, but in one in particular, you outlined kind of four fundamental skills that go into this idea of courage. So I feel like you've kind of touched on a few, but could we dive into those a little more?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is providing the spark without the push.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
love that. So providing the spark without the push. Okay, I like that.
with some kids, you might have to dim that because they're
Mm.
too reckless. They're
Quick to jump in. Yes.
temperamentally, yeah, yeah. So you have to, like, moderate that and get them to be thoughtful. So
Mhm. I was that kid. I needed to be taught to heed caution. My children are the opposite. They need the nudge.
like, they need the spark. But
Yes.
we want to try to get across to them that don't be afraid of fear. And so instead of
Mm,
asking or telling a child, don't be afraid, we ask the child, what are you afraid of?
mm,
What's going on here? What's the danger? What's the issue? Just get their thinking. You want the thinking part of their brain to
yeah.
interact with the emotional part of their brain. Not
Mm,
not be afraid of fear. Put your thinking cap on and to think, is the danger real? Is it something that we have to be cautious about, or is it something we need to kind of reassure ourselves, say it's
mhm.
okay? So that's
Yes.
part of being mindful.
Yes. Well, and that, yeah, I mean, kind of coming back to that description of persevering despite fears, like the fear is there. Let's understand it. Um, like that's an important part of it.
And as the child gets older, I mean, they're not only managing their own emotions, the arousal that they're feeling from distress, but they're also beginning to think about what their principles,
Mm,
how, the sense of true north, and how they should be responding
yes.
to risk and to
Mm.
maintain their own sense of self respect.
Well, and those morals and value I mean, especially in grade school, those morals and values are developing, and so, yeah, thinking those are definitely a part of courage too.
And we're while we're helping kids think about the fear, we're also helping them think about their the courage that they could feel in responding to another person's distress. So
Mm,
that's why the Carnegie Hero Medal is really about that. It's about people who use their courage in service of caring about another
mm.
person and taking action to help them.
Yes.
So courage begins by focusing on yourself. That's very important for self-respect.
Yeah.
Also means that you're responding to the distress of others. So you've got that sense of compassion in
Mm.
response to distress.
Absolutely. Well, and I even think so. Unfortunately, my kids and I have been to the doctor's office a lot I mean, in their whole life, but in the last few months, luckily with pretty acute, minor type things. But I think of the way that I see my two kids honestly kind of practice courage for each other. One might volunteer to go first, or one might offer to hold the other one's hand or rub their back. And that's a small thing, but they're responding to the distress of their sibling who is nervous. Both of my kids, honestly, nervous about the doctor.
Yeah, think about it. Even a preschooler, a young grade schooler, hears her mother crying in an
Mhm.
adjacent room, and she stops and listens and realizes, oh, my mother is in distress. My mother is sad. I love my mother. And she runs and gets her teddy bear, rushes to
Mm.
her mother's side while the tears are flowing, and hands it to her.
Yes.
That's their responding with from within their own set of understanding of what uh, alleviates distress, and using the teddy bear as an example.
Yes.
And later on, uh, you have that same child who's going to need courage, need that set of principles when they see bullying going on, like in elementary
Mm.
school and grade school, in
Yes.
their classrooms, in the hallways, in high school, and
Mhm.
how they respond to that. Um, the fear that they feel and taking a chance and responding and to support somebody who's going through that. Um, so being what I would say, talking with the bullying issue in elementary school and in services with the kids, so like being smart with your heart. Sometimes
Ah.
that's the same. You see the problem, you feel that distress by the other person. Now, what's the smartest way to respond to show that
Mm.
support?
Yes, I love that. Smart with your heart as a way to think about appropriate courage, right? And you're right, there is a mix of that self-focus in terms of honoring your own morals and values, but also the risk of like or not risk, the priority of others, like you said, like in distress or that empathy.
Yeah, it's that the morals that you're talking about. That's a person's sense of what's true north.
Mhm.
You don't follow that. If you turn away from that out of fear, then you lose self-respect. And we
Mm.
want children, to respond smartly to risk of other people
Yes.
and themselves in their own response. And one reason for doing that is we want that child to grow up feeling self-respect,
Mm.
and not just respect for other people, that person being bullied, but also I'm acting in response to this situation out of maintaining my own self-respect. So
Yes.
that's an important part of that. So I think that thinking about fear, getting your mind attentive to the danger and what's the real risk is,
Mhm.
but then responding with that courage, not just for yourself on your own behalf, but also on behalf of another person. That helps to build community. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Within
Creating
the
a space
school.
where everybody's welcome and safe and protected by each other and
And it takes a risk. I mean, there's a risk
mm,
here, and
mhm.
just as there's a huge risk for those folks on that plane um,
Yes.
during 9/11, and how they responded to those hijackers. I mean, huge risk,
Yes.
but they took action. And part of that, what drove them was that sense of true north and the principles that they had, that they felt.
Mhm. Oh, yes. Well, and, I honestly feel like so you outlined like I said, you outlined 4 fundamental skills for courage in that article, but I honestly feel like I heard you kinda pare it down to 2 almost. The whole, like, being mindful and persevering in the fear and being mindful of it being one, but then, yeah, caring about yourself and responding compassionately to others. Um, kind of almost summarized it in 2.
Yeah, being strong with your heart. I mean, it's you want
Yes.
kids to have a good heart, but you want them to be smart too when
Yes.
they're faced with risk and danger, which is what fear is saying to you. It's a little that bell going up in your head. There's a risk here. Your heart's beating fast. That's an emotional thing. The arousal that you feel. Well, how do you respond to that arousal? And how do you stand up for yourself in terms of what you believe is important and how you should act?
Absolutely. Well, oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Chuck, for sharing your expertise and your experience with us on this. I mean, yeah, this topic that I feel like doesn't always come to the forefront as parents of helping our kids be courageous, but that is so important. A thing we want to foster in our kids. So before we say goodbye, I wanted to ask anything else that you want to share with our parents and listeners?
Well, I think what's important to me is when I'm talking with parents is to treasure every moment that you have with your child because they're growing up so fast. So you don't want
Yes.
to be too wasteful in those moments. Take advantage of those
Hmm.
and do the best that you possibly can. What else can you do but that?
Yeah,
So that when you're
absolutely.
old and gray like me, you look back on your life and you can feel like, well, yeah, I'm not perfect. I made
Mhm.
mistakes, but I did the best I could, and I'm
Mhm.
proud of what I did. So, I
Yes.
was talking with parents outside that 4-H building, late at night after a program on discipline with children.
Yeah.
It'd be like look back on in the future, look back on these moments with your child, and what can you do to maintain your own sense of
Mhm.
pride in your reaction.
Yes.
Treasure those moments because they grow up so fast.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. I know you have a wealth of knowledge that we didn't even get to tap into in this short bonus episode. But this whole topic of raising courageous kids, you are definitely the right person to be here with us. So thank you so much for your time.
If I can say one more thing, I
Oh,
would
please.
suggest that your listeners go to carnegiehero.org. That's all one word, carnegiehero.org, and look up examples of people in your state or your city who received that medal since they began giving it out in the very early 1900s.
Yeah.
And you'd be just amazed at what everyday people will do out of the sense of self-respect and caring about other people. They're
Oh,
amazing stories on that site.
absolutely. Well, that is going to be our homework for all of us. I'm going to go do it too. So,
Homework.
well, again, thank you so much, Chuck. We are so glad and honestly humbled to have you here with us. So, hopefully, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
Thanks, Chuck. Holy cow. Having that conversation with Chuck is just, oh, it's so great. I hope you enjoyed listening to it and learning from him as much as I enjoyed learning from him and having that conversation. I think just some to highlight some of those things that he shared with us. I love his definition of courage being about persevering despite fear. It's not about that you're never scared or anything like that, but that we can be mindful in our fear, we can understand it. And understanding fear as like a necessary and functional thing. Love that. I hadn't really thought about it as like an instinct. If we gotta have fear, if we don't, that's problematic. And I think back to our episode we did with Rob Copeland back in season 3 on temperament and that idea of approach and withdrawal and that idea that we need to for if we have high approach, we might need to heed caution. We might need to help our kids learn to do that. And then giving that I liked Chuck's term of spark with a push. And or what do you say with a nudge? Now I'm gonna have to go back and listen, but like the idea of having a little spark when it comes to courage. And so those strategies that he shared with us for helping raise courageous kids, really helping our kids stay mindful in their fear, to understand their fear, to be curious about it. But yeah, to stay in their I was gonna say mindful brain. Can I say that? But to stay in their logical brain and to be mindful of like when they're in fear, so they're not getting that emotional hijacking. And then yeah, thinking about it, that other strategy of as respect for yourself, to be courageous, to honor your values and your morals, but also respect and compassion for other kids, other people. And that those are great things. Those are things I want to see in my kids. But to know how to foster them and to have the practical strategies from an expert, from an actual expert, is just something that I get really excited about. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Don't be afraid to reach out to us if you've got questions, follow up, a thing like that. We would love to share more information with you. So thanks for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. Don't forget to be courageous yourself as you raise courageous kids. Come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.